Hey folks, Devin Doan here, lead content producer at Loft 100 Studios. You're tuned into the Big Biz Show. But before we dive into today's episode, I want to talk about a favorite American pastime, white-collar crime. Specifically today, we're talking about Ponzi schemes, those financial house of cards that always collapse, leaving everyone broke. It's named after one of its original masterminds, Charles Ponzi. The scheme has transcended time, technology, and cultures. It's an immortal scam, powered by the perfect cocktail of greed and ignorance. Some might even argue that the entire US financial system is a giant Ponzi scheme. And by some, I mean me, but hang tight, we'll get to that. What is a Ponzi scheme? Let's start with the basics. Charles Ponzi was an Italian immigrant with big dreams and a knack for bad decisions. After blowing through his father's inheritance in college, because let's face it, who hasn't, he bounced from one hustle to another all over North America. At one point, even working as a coyote, smuggling immigrants across the Canadian border. Talk about a flip from today, right? Eventually, he landed in Boston, where most bad things happen. Eventually, he landed in Boston, where he claimed to have cracked the code for turning postal reply coupons into gold. Investors saw crazy returns and word spread, but the truth, there were no profits. Ponzi was simply taking money from new investors to pay old ones, and when the new money dried up, the whole scheme collapsed, taking thousands of investors and several banks down with it. It's simple. Promise insane returns and use new money to pay old investors. Hope nobody notices, buy a yacht. Easy, right? The whole thing relies on a constant influx of cash though, and when that stops, game over. Now here's the kicker. Charles Ponzi wasn't even the first to run this con. Back in the 1870s, a woman in Germany named Adele Spitzeder used the same rob Peter to pay Paul strategy to fleece people. So shout out to Adele out there for proving Ponzi schemes have always been an equal opportunity grift. Shout out ladies. But who took the cake? Who is the undisputed king of Ponzi schemes?
Bernie Madoff.
Bernie Madoff.
Bernie Madoff.
Bernie Madoff. Let's see what it takes to earn a 150-year prison sentence. Now, Madoff started out legit, too legit to quit, building one of Wall Street's most successful trading firms. By the 1980s, he was a NASDAQ chairman, a trusted figure in finance, and the go-to guy for high-profile investors. But behind the curtain, Madoff was running a $65 billion scheme, using new money to pay old returns while skimming billions off the top for himself. Sound familiar? Well, what brought him down? The same thing that always does. The money ran out. The 2008 financial crisis hit, and then investors tried to pull their funds. Madoff couldn't keep up. The scheme collapsed, he admitted to it, and then was sentenced to 150 years in prison. Good, that guy. Anyways, the twist, Madoff's bombshell claim. Here's where it gets wild. After his conviction, Madoff reportedly told visitors there was actually a bigger Ponzi scheme out there than the first, one to dwarf them all, the US financial system.
No one has any criminal convictions. The whole new regulatory reform is a joke. The whole government is a Ponzi scheme.
That's right. According to Madoff, the endless borrowing, money printing, and bond buying spree are just a more sophisticated version of what he did. And here's the kicker. He might not be wrong. Now let's be clear. The US financial system isn't a Ponzi scheme in the traditional sense. Unlike Charles Ponzi or Bernie Madoff, the government has tools like taxation, monetary policy, and economic growth to manage its debt. However, the cracks begin to show when debt grows faster than the economy itself.
In order for the US economy to function, we have to borrow more and more money from the rest of the world. And the more money they loan us today, the more money they have to loan us in the future. And if they ever stop loaning, the whole thing collapses and we can't pay them back.
At that point, we're not far off from the same mechanics that brought down Ponzi and Madoff, relying on endless new money just to keep the cycle alive. It don't work that way, guys. And if lenders, whether foreign governments, institutions, or taxpayers, lose confidence in the system, the whole thing starts to wobble. And that's when the parallels to a Ponzi scheme become kind of hard to ignore. It's a balancing act, and the stakes couldn't be any higher. Just like me.
If they didn't keep creating new money in larger and larger amounts, the whole thing would crash, because that's where the money comes from to pay off the previous loans. It's the new loans. So that's why it's a Ponzi scheme. It's a classic Ponzi scheme.
All right, I'm gonna let you guys chew on that one for a while. Let's see what the rest of the crew is up to at the big desk. I'm Devin Doan, and you're watching The Big Biz Show.